We are going to continue working on our Learning Log app. And in this particular chapter, we are going to do insert templates, and we're also going to do some update or edit templates. We will be creating a registration and login system. We're going to utilize some of the built-in features in Django for that. And we'll continue kind of building out the app, modifying the views, creating functions in those views that will route over to the templates that we're going to be creating. And we're also going to have to modify the URLs file as well. So we are going to start with doing the insert pages for topics and entries, and then we'll get into doing our edit or update pages. Any page that basically lets us enter or submit information into Django is considered to be a form. And Django does include a helper class called Model Form that actually makes creating forms pretty easy. So the procedures that we are going to be following are very similar to what we did for templates. There's just one additional step. So we are going to, first of all, add a new form class that we're going to derive from model forms. And we are going to be creating a file called forms.py. Then we're going to edit our urls.py and add a path to our new form template that we're going to create. We're going to edit views.py, and that will be retrieving any data that the form needs, or it'll also render the form. And then we're going to create the template that extends from our base template for inserting records. So that's kind of the process. So the extra step that we have in there is forms.py. We did not have that before. We did the URLs, we edited the views, we created the templates, which are HTML files, but we didn't have to modify or create a forms file. So a little background information on deriving from the model form helper class. So we are going to be creating a new class that derives from model.modelForm. The new class is going to include a meta class with parameters for the models and fields that we want to display. We can also provide labels and other information. There are default labels that will automatically be created, but if we don't want the defaults, we can override them and create our own. I included a link to the documentation on model forms because there's a lot more that you can do than we are going to be covering. So the syntax that we are going to follow, first we have to import models, and then we create a new class deriving from our model form. Here's our syntax for creating our model, and then below that we have our syntax for creating forms. And the forms are based on the models, which is why I'm showing you or reminding you what that syntax is. For the forms, we have to import the forms, and then we also have to import the class from our models. And remember, this is the models.py file that it is referring to. The dot here in front means that it's in the same directory as our forms. And then when we create the form, the convention is to give it a class name with the word form on the end. And then it is being derived from model form. And then we have a meta class, and that indicates the name of the model and the fields that we want to include in our form. And as I mentioned, the labels are done by default. So here's a little example that comes right from Django. We've got the import models. This is their model. And you'll see here's a list. It's got some tuples in it. And then we've got a model called author and another one called book. And just kind of as an FYI, if you want a drop-down list in your form that has some kind of pre-built choices in it, in your model, you need to set up something like title choices. Because if you do this, then you can create a field and you can tell it the length, which is the maximum length of the key here. And then you can tell it that the choices are the ones that are listed. And then it will create a drop-down list for you. So it's pretty cool. Anyway, so this is our model. Just giving you another look at a little different model. And then down here, we have our forms. And so we're importing the form. Then we're also importing the two models that we are going to create forms for. So we've got dot models, and we're importing author and book. And then we are going to be using the default labels, or if we were creating this, that's what we would be doing. So basically, this is called author form. This is called book form, going with the convention. And then using the meta class, we are specifying the author model here, the book model here, and we're indicating which fields we want included in the form. And Django kind of does a lot of the rest of the work for you. So there are some defaults that Django has when it is generating forms, some assumptions that it makes. And if your model field is any of these integer field types, it will do a text input if field.localize is set to false. It will normalize to a Python integer, and it validates as an integer. And you can set the max and minimum values if you would like, and it will validate the range. So you can kind of look through this list, kind of look over here to see what kind of input it creates. The important thing is what it normalizes to, because that tells you what the data is going to be. And then how do you override those defaults if you don't want to use them? So the way that you override the defaults is using the meta class. And overriding a label, which is probably what you are going to want to override if you override anything. And honestly, I would take a look at what it does by default first. And then if I didn't like that, I would go ahead and try to override it. But if you wanted to override a label, you would have whatever your field is equals forms dot care field. Then you've got label equals, and this would be whatever text you want displayed. Okay, again, here's an example for URL, how that is overridden here. And the default for a label is to convert the underscores to spaces and to only capitalize the first letter of the field. So, I mean, that's a pretty reasonable default. If you use camel casing, then you probably are going to want to do some overriding, especially if you have two words and you want the space between them. So here's a live example of some overrides using that author and book example that we looked at before. And we are going to be overriding one of the types it automatically converts into. So we're pulling in text area. And so here we've got the author form. Again, it's telling us the model and the fields that it's pulling in. And then it's using a widget to use a text area box. So for name, okay, it is going to be displaying a text area box, and it's specifying columns and rows. In addition to using the meta class for labels, you can specify error messages in help text. So how do you do that? So here's another example. For this one, we've got our fields, and instead of having name display for a label, they wanted it to be called writer. And so this is how it is overridden. You can see we've got name, colon, underscore, and in parentheses is what we want displayed instead. So this is how I would recommend that you override your labels. Okay? You can actually string them all together in one statement. And then here is help text for name. And obviously you guys would probably put better text than this, but this is just an example. And then this is how you would do an error message. Okay, so again, I probably would not go through and do all the overriding of the defaults unless you don't like the defaults. Then I would go in and make those changes. So all of the form information is new. The rest of this is pretty much what we were doing in chapter 18. So we do have to modify URLs. And so we've got our URL patterns, and it's kind of the same as what we did for the templates. We've got the request. This is the URL request that would be keyed in. We have to direct them to a view function, and we're giving it a name to refer to in our Python code. Then we modify the views.py file. Not only does this file render our HTML templates, but it's also going to render our forms. One convention that you should be aware of when you're working with a form is that when the form is submitted, the action used is post. Okay, that is an assumption that Django makes. The get is basically for retrieving, not posting. Also, when we create the forms, you will notice that if the form hasn't posted, an empty form is going to be displayed. If the form has posted, it's checked to make sure the data is valid before that data is saved to the database. Now, in a lot of systems, the inserts and edits will use the same form, but we are going to be creating different forms for the insert and the edit. And then as far as the template goes, you will notice that we are going to be basically working with the form tag, which kind of makes sense. The action is going to be basically sending them to, in this case, if it's an insert, to a new topic. You'll notice the method should be post. And then we include a CSRF token. And then we have another little command, form.as_p. So what this does is it says that, each line in our form we want to form as a paragraph. And CSRF token is the preventing the cross-site forgery that occurs if you have an authenticated user accessing areas they are not supposed to be. Okay, so it's actually going to prevent that cross-site request forgery. Okay, so again, that would be an authorized user basically attacking our own system. And with that, we are going to be going through HandsOn1 followed by HandsOn2. So first we're going to do a form that can handle inserting new topics. So in your book, this is on page 410, and you're going to want to go ahead and launch VS Code. And I've got VS Code open, and I've gone ahead and kind of resized the web page here. I'm going to close everything I have open. I got way too much open here. And then what I need to do is create a new forms page, and it needs to be in the same directory as models. So here's my models page, and that is in my learning logs. And so that is the directory that I am going to be creating forms in. So I'm going to go ahead and do a new page. I'm going to save it as forms.py, and that needs to go in learning logs. And so the very first line, I have to import forms. And then I have to import the topic model. And I need to tell Django it's in the current directory, so I enter a dot, and then I do models, because that is the name of the file. It's models.py. And then I do import topic. And then I create my form class, and I'm going to call it topic form, which is the convention. And that is inheriting from forms.modelForm. And I'm going to do my little meta class here, subclass, and setting my model equal to topic. And if you remember, our topic form does not have a lot going on. We certainly don't need to pull in the date, because that is automatically going to be populated with data. So the only field that we need to bring in is the text field. And so the name of the field, if you remember, I'm going to pull this up to show you. The name of the field is text, so that is what we are going to include. We do not need to include date added because that is automatically populated. So we're saying our fields, and we only have one, which hopefully you will spell right, is text. And then we will say for the label, this is the dictionary. And then we'll leave this blank. And so that is really all there is to defining our first form. Okay, so basically for label, it's just telling it to create the text label. That's all it's doing. And then we are not overriding it with anything. So that's our first step. Let's save that. Our second step, we are going to be modifying the URLs file so that up in the address bar, they will be able to key in a new underscore topic, or they can select it from a menu that we'll be creating, and it will route them to the proper page. So learning logs URL, or URLs, needs to be modified. And we'll add a little comment here. And let's do our path. So really nothing new that we're doing here. It's the same thing that we did in chapter 18. Of course, always want to check so that you don't do typos. Typos in this system are a really bad thing. So next step. So we've got the form class created. We've got the path created. Now we have to modify the views file and create a function. Let me save this. And up at the top, let's just double check and make sure. We're going to be adding redirect here because once they enter the data into the form and they submit it, as long as there are no errors, then we want that data saved to the database, and we want the user redirected to the list of topics. Okay, they don't need to stay on the new topic form. So we're adding redirect up there. And we've imported models, but we still need to import forms. And forms is in the same directory. So we're going to do a .forms because the name of the file is forms.py. And then we're saying import topic form. And then down here at the bottom, we're going to go ahead and create this function. And I'll pause while I key all of this in. Okay, so let's talk about what this function is doing. First thing it does is it's checking to see if the form was submitted. That is what doesn't equal post it means. Because the form we are going to create, the method is equal to post. If that hasn't happened, if they haven't submitted, then the request.method is not going to be post. So we're basically going to display the form. Okay. Otherwise, if it has posted, if they filled it in and they've submitted, then the request method will be post. So if they have submitted and posted the form, we are retrieving all of that data and we're storing it in a form variable. And then we're checking to see if it's valid. So if there's errors, is valid is going to be false. Okay. This is kind of built in to the Django. So this is not unusual for a server-side system. Most of them have this kind of feature that if there's an error, it is not valid any longer. So if there is an error, then it's not going to save it to the database, obviously. What will happen is that that form data with the error is going to end up getting rendered in that new topic form. So it will display it back to the user with the error message. Otherwise, if there's no errors, the data is going to be saved. And then the user is going to be redirected to that topics page. Okay, so that is what is going on. And so at this point, we have added the information for the form, the URL, and the view. And so what we have left is the actual HTML page that will display. And so this needs to go in our template. So this is under templates and learning logs, where all of our other forms are displayed. So let me see where that is. That would be up here. And you can see we've got the other pages. So that's where this one needs to go as well. I'm going to do a new page and I'm going to save it. And I'm going to go into templates and learning logs. And we're going to call it new topic. So new underscore topic .html. So this is going to be very, very similar to what we did before. The difference is that we have this CSRF token, and we're also telling it that each line in the form should be formatted as a paragraph. We're also going to be creating a button. And so it's not a whole lot of code that we need to enter, but the form itself and a little title for the form are going to go inside block content. So I'm going to pause while I key that in. So here is our new topic page. And I do want to point out here that the action is taking them into new topics. So that is the new topic function that we just created in the view. Okay, and remember that new topic function is looking for the form to be posted. So if it's not posted, we get the empty form, and if it is posted, it's either going to save the data and redirect, or it's going to display this form with the errors. Okay, so that is what the action is doing. And we've pretty much talked about everything else. But you can see how simple it is in Django to create a form. And if you guys remember, HTML and CSS. It's a lot of work keying in a form, and this just makes it a lot easier for us. Now, we've got all of this pretty much wired up. The only thing that we still should do is create a little add topic button that we will display in the topic summary page. So we're going to be editing topics.html, and we're going to add a little link, which I'm referring to as a button, but technically it is a link. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we're opening up topic, or topics, the plural. And we're going to add a little link, and it's going to go right below our closing URL here. So this routes to the new topic form. Remember to put the single quotes in. And then the link will say add a new topic. And let's just take a little double check here. I'm going to move that back. All right, that looks okay. So I'm going to save. I'm going to actually go in and save these files because that is one of my bad habits. And at this point, we would be able to run the app. So we do need to go into command prompt. We've got to change directories to the location of learning logs. And we need to go into our environment, scripts, and activate. And I'm going to go back up 2 levels here. And we need to run the server. Oops, Python. Manage.py, run server. All right. So localhost. Let's go into topics, add a new topic. And that works.